Welcome back to this episode of the 2-3 Zone podcast. I am your co-host Josh, and with me, as always, is my pal Cameron.
What's happening, everybody?
One of the ensuing or ongoing, debates within the NBA community is whether we have to, or which side we should pick on this struggle between the players and the referees we've been seeing lately. It's been out of control this year, and this is something that we never would have thought would have happened. If we look back at, the early 2000s or even the 1990s where players they'd go so as far as to fist fight with each other, and the referees, the best they could do is try and break them up, or, the most they'd get slapped with was a technical foul. But most recently, we've been seeing this explode around the NBA. I think the most controversial one to date this year would be the situation, a handful of days ago with Toronto and Oklahoma, where Toronto was robbed of that game. Now, you can say that because, I'm a Spurs fan, I wanted Oklahoma to lose, but, DeMar DeRozan going into the lane with a layup was slapped. He admitted it, the instant replay showed that he was slapped, and the referees didn't call anything. So, of course, what did you expect for him to do other than complain and, bitch to the refs? That's exactly what happened, which resulted in him getting thrown out. And then in the last minute, Serge Ibaka was thrown out. And then Dwayne Casey, who, again, in the instant replays, he wasn't saying anything. The broadcasters and the players were saying it was a fan shouting at the ref. The refs threw out Dwayne Casey. And, Dwayne Casey was very professional about it, but DeMar DeRozan went off on the referees. And I think rightfully so. Cameron, what are your thoughts on this struggle between the refs and the players this year in the NBA?
This year, I think, at least I've seen the most technical fouls given out to players who we don't necessarily see get a lot of technical fouls.
LeBron James got his
first career ejection this year. And I believe that was either before or after. Kevin Durant had received a lot of technical fouls from the referees. And I think that what's happening is the players want to communicate with the refs. And I don't know if you can tell, but I'm on the side of the players in this instance.
I am too.
The players want to communicate with the refs. And I'm glad that there should be I'm glad that there is some more communication. We saw at the All-Star weekend, I believe, there was a meeting held between the players and the refs.
Well, I don't mean to interrupt you, but if we go to that meeting,
there are only two players.
It was only
Spencer Dinwiddie and Andre Iguodala were the only two players in that meeting, I believe.
Bless up Spencer Dinwiddie, the GOAT.
Yes.
But again, just Dinwiddie and Iguodala were the only ones that bothered to show.
Yeah, and you'd think that there'd be more players like, people who are getting the most technical fouls, like Draymond Green, DeMarcus Cousins,
Anthony
Kevin
Davis.
Durant. Maybe even LeBron James and Anthony Davis is in that conversation. Maybe even LeBron James, even though he doesn't receive a lot of technical fouls, he's a guy that when you see going to the rim, he's much bigger and much stronger than the rest of his opponents. And he might not receive the same foul calls as a player, let's say like, James Harden, or let's take a point guard, for instance, Steph Curry, who, although they are, NBA caliber athletes, it'd be easier to get a call on them because when they get hit, they would you could see it more easily. With a specimen like LeBron or a big man like Boogie Cousins, it's a lot harder to make those calls. And I do feel for the refs because being a ref for an NBA game is probably one of the worst environments that you could be in for your career, because either people hate you or love you, but most of the time they're going to hate you because everybody thinks that you're making the wrong call. So I understand why the refs could be frustrated at, the players up in arms about how the games are being refereed. But this year has also been a crazy year for technical fouls. And I think that with that comes more, agitation towards the refs. What would your take on this year and the technical foul frenzy be?
I think it's out of control, and I think that this is something that Adam Silver needs to take control of right now, instead of focusing on the one and done rule and whether or not we should have a 16-seed playoff conference instead of two conferences. I think this is the most important thing that needs to be talked about in the NBA today. And I want to ask you a question. Do you think that is it just the fact that the refs are being intimidated by the players, or do you think they're blatantly rigging a few games? I'd
Well, I
say
think it's hard to say if they're blatantly rigging a few games because, in recent history, Tim Donaghy
Mhm.
rigged the 2002 Western Conference Finals, and it seems that after that, there would be a.
Oh no, it's even the regular finals as well.
Uh-huh.
It says that
Uh,
Game 3 of 2008 of the 2008 NBA Finals was also a scene of a crime with the refs going away and stealing the game from them. Yeah, but I think I'm glad that you brought up the Lakers Kings playoff series. Would you mind going into that?
Sure. And I'd also like to bring up the Dallas Mavericks and Miami Heat series as well. I think that was in 04-05, if I'm not mistaken, where D-Wade won his first title.
05-06. Yes.
Sorry, 05-06. I think those two instances would have put a stop to blatantly rigging NBA games because those two, I think, were the most blatant in recent NBA history. So I can't really say whether or not that they're rigging the games, but I can tell you that the the final minutes report, the last 2 minutes report, they've shown some controversial calls.
Yeah.
It should have been either fouls or technical fouls. Most recently, in the series, the regular season series between the Cavs and Warriors, if you remember Christmas Day, I believe it was 2016, LeBron should have got a technical foul for hanging on the rim excessively.
And Richard Jefferson
And-
should have gotten a foul for tripping Kevin Durant.
Yes, and I think in this regular season, Kevin Durant hard fouled LeBron James, and they called it as a block. I don't know if this is necessarily blatantly rigging for other teams to win, or if this is sort of a let him play kind of situation. But I'll tell you what, I am proud of other teammates, and especially head coaches, sticking up for their players. I think this all started for me personally, the witness of these coaches sticking up for their players, with David Fisdale in the 2017 playoffs. When we played the we as in the Spurs, when the Spurs played the Memphis Grizzlies,
Yes.
his "Take That for Data" speech, it showed what the power that a head coach can have, affecting their team's morale, bringing them up, and how much respect you would get from your players.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that with this surge of head coaches sticking up for their players, taking the fine and speaking out against what they see as outrageous, that set a culture for the NBA and people being able to speak up and not care what the fine is for speaking their minds. And I think that has led to a conversation nationwide about the referees this season and how they should officiate the games. What's your take?
I don't think we're ever going to have a case as extreme as the 2002 Western Conference Finals, where
No, that was
in Game
blatant
6
rigging.
the
You
Lakers
could
had
tell.
in Game 6 the Lakers had 40 free throws in one game. Just that game alone was 40 free throws. But again, this is an ongoing nationwide debate. I agree, I like that you brought that up because even again another recent incident with the Rockets and the Timberwolves, I like that Gerald Green stood up for his teammate Chris Paul when he was thrown to the floor by Gorgie Dang, and I like it even more that Chris Paul offered to pay the fine for Gerald Green. I don't know do you think was that worth throwing him out of the game? I mean, again, this is post our test, but
Yeah, post Malice at the Palace.
does that warrant an automatic ejection? Again, it didn't really hurt the Rockets; they won the game, but that was him simply sticking up for a teammate that got hard fouled. Where I think Gorgie Dang was just hit with a technical at first, or I might be wrong. Maybe he was thrown out.
It's a tough situation because when a scuffle goes down, there have been a lot of scuffles recently. Actually, Ricky Rubio has been the butt end of a lot of them.
Him being hurt or
I'm
him
thinking
causing
of the
incidents?
Suns. The Suns going at Ricky Rubio.
Yes.
Marquise Chris just throwing him to the ground. So it's important to think of it in context, but also you have to be objective.
Yes.
If you're just playing a game and somebody throws another player to the ground out of nowhere, that should be, in my opinion, an automatic ejection.
Unless it's UFC, but
Yes, unless we're back in the 70s where
Unless
Malone would fight everybody.
unless you're expecting a Conor McGregor cage kick to the head, you
That's
shouldn't throw
definitely
someone to the
not gonna
ground.
happen in the NBA that I'm aware of. I think Joe would be be the most likely to do it. But anyway, that's besides the point. If you throw somebody to the ground, you have to keep that rule objective, and it doesn't matter the context. I know I said you have to keep it in context, but the context for throwing someone to the ground, practically a wrestling move, it shouldn't be tolerated. It gives a bad light to the league. Some fans enjoy, watching the NBA go back to these gritty days of, almost fights breaking out. But you have to think of it from a PR perspective. I mean, what can the league do about this? And if they agree to it, wouldn't that make them lose funding?
Yeah.
Because of the violence shown.
But do you think the
I'm
NBA?
trying to come at it from both perspectives here, if that makes sense.
Do you think the NBA would make money if they showed more violence, knowing how violent the United States can be? Do you think that? It's sad and depressing to bring up something like that, but again, do you think the NBA would make money from the refs not doing anything about scuffles and fights?
I think that the viewers would enjoy seeing more tough basketball, because you hear old heads today complain about, back in my day you were able to hand check, and back in my day that wouldn't have been a flagrant one. But the league has changed. It has gotten to a softer league. I can say that with complete objectivity.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think that it'd be a bad move by corporate NBA if they allowed stuff like this to happen, because I don't see how many sponsorships and brand deals the NBA would get if they were to turn it into NBA/UFC. That's just my take on it.
Okay, but again, if it's a bad thing to happen, why is it that the refs are getting so intimidated by these players? And again, if we put it into perspective, I too would be intimidated if a 250-pound LeBron James was rushing at me, yelling and throwing his arms. But again, these are things that they're trained for. I don't think I've ever been so confused on which side I want to be with, because I'm looking at it from both perspectives. I don't know if I want to side with the referees because they're being scared by these NBA players, but again, that's something that as I already said, they're trained for. And if we look on the players, there are games that you can argue that are being blatantly rigged by the NBA refs. In most recent cases, that Toronto game against Oklahoma City, I'll go as far as to say it right here. I think that game was rigged.
I think that with the throwing out of technical fouls here and there, it's difficult for players to know what they can and can't do. Can they show emotion when they react to a foul call? How much emotion can they show? How do they know when to regulate it?
But you don't want to do jumping jacks like Draymond Green when you get fouled. I think that crosses the line.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think that this notion of refs versus players isn't an ongoing thing necessarily because of all the foul calls. I mean, there are definitely a lot of calls that should be called. But I think it's more of a misunderstanding between the refs and the players, of the players not knowing when they will or will not receive a technical foul. Because a technical foul, in a game context, one more technical foul and you're out. And so how do you know when to draw that line of what actions are, technical foul worthy of what aren't? But then from an employment perspective, that's a lot of money. $12,000 to us, at least it would seem that's a lot of money. But to them, it might seem
that's pocket change.
Pocket change. But it's still a loss in revenue because of a misunderstanding between the players and the refs. And I think that's where we stand today. What constitutes as a technical foul and what does not constitute as a technical foul, and how can the league solve this problem of calls being made incorrectly, as we can see in the final 2-minute report.
Again, I don't think that this should be a problem at all, or as much of a problem as it is today. And I like that you brought up that this is something that the players need to be told, or they need to learn what crosses the line. And again,
there needs to be communication. Definitely.
I think a handbook or something like that would be too extreme, but the players need to know when they're doing something that warrants a technical foul. It's not something that should be judged by the referee, and I think that's where a lot of the problem lies. The power of the technical and flagrant foul and of the ejection lies within the referee, and when you scare the referee it kicks into a fight or flight instinct, and I think that they're more likely to hit flight rather than deal with this issue that's being presented to them. And with that, I'm going to draw to conclusion this episode of the 2-3 Zone podcast. Shout out Coach Carr.
Shout out Coach Carr as always.
And I'd like to thank you all for listening. Give us a like, a follow, a subscribe. Don't agree with anything we might have said? Don't agree with a little bit of something we might not have said? Let us know in the comments. We'll always be happy to look back at them. Thank you guys for watching.